guys, it's Alice, and today I'm going to review the books I read in the first part of April. It's going to start off a little bit rough today. The first book that I finished was Breaking and Entering by Jeremy N. Smith. This is nonfiction, it's a biography, and it tells the story of a female hacker called Alien who entered MIT in 1998 and eventually becomes this international expert in hacking and cybersecurity. So I've actually been reading this on and off for maybe like 2 months. This is a book that I've just sort of kept in my bag and I've just read a little bit in here and there, and I really thought this was going to be the perfect read for me. Like, when I discovered this book, I was so excited about it. But sadly, this was just not my thing at all. I spent such a long time getting through this, and I should have just DNF'd it because I really didn't enjoy it at all. I do think the story of this woman is probably very interesting, but there's something about the way this is written that just made it really boring to me, and I didn't really feel like we got to know this woman at all, and instead of getting to know her as a person, I felt like we spent a lot of unnecessary time reading about what she was wearing and who she was sleeping with, and I just feel like there's a lack of depth to the way that she is portrayed in this book that makes it very difficult to care about any of the stuff that goes on in here. I didn't find the hacking and the cybersecurity bits in here particularly interesting either, which was a shame because it's something I would love to learn more about, but the way it's written about in this book doesn't make it seem like an interesting topic at all. To me, it feels like there is a little bit of a lack of authenticity to this, and it just felt like a very superficial book to me, which is a shame because I do really think that this story could be really interesting and this person could be really interesting to read about if honestly it was just written better, which I know is harsh, but yeah, I gave this a 1 out of 5 stars. Happily, I did have a little bit more luck with the second book that I finished, which was The Confessions of Frannie Langton by Sarah Collins. This is a historical fiction novel, and it's set in London in 1826, where we meet Frannie Langton, who is a former slave from Jamaica, and she has been charged with murdering the couple that she worked for. So there are a lot of things about this book that sort of tick the right boxes for me. It's exactly the type of historical fiction that I like. I really liked the setting of both London and Jamaica, and the whole thing has this fantastic gothic feel to it. This is quite a tragic and brutal story, and it keeps up suspense throughout the entire novel. And I really liked reading about our main character and really getting inside of her head. I think she's a very interesting and complicated character, and I generally found most of the characters in here very interesting, and I really liked reading about the relationships between all of them. I liked the writing in this and the way that it captures the different settings, and it's really good at creating atmosphere, but sometimes it does feel a little bit disjointed and confusing, at least to me. I'm thinking maybe it's supposed to be that way though, so that might just be personal preference. This is kind of a slow book, and I don't mind that, but I do think that this starts off stronger than it finishes, and there's a definite dip in the middle of this book where I found my interest waning quite a lot, and I felt like I never quite recovered from that, even though I did like the ending. I think this is a great book to read if you like gothic historical fiction though, and it is quite a shocking story sometimes, and it has a lot of great things going on in it, and I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. Next, I read The Snack Thief by Andrea Camilleri. This is a mystery novel. It's translated from Italian, and it's one of the books in the Inspector Montalbano series, and in this one we meet the inspector as he is called out to investigate a murder that has happened in an elevator. This was a quick and engrossing read, and I really enjoyed it, and I feel like a lot of the stuff that I loved about this book are the same stuff that I loved in the first book. I really love the setting of this. I love reading about the inspector. I love all of the descriptions of food, like there's a lot of that in here, and I just love that. And I thought the mystery was really intriguing in this, probably more so than in the first book. I felt like this mystery was quite layered, and that was really cool. I also really like the way this is written, and just revisiting the inspector and seeing him work was really fun, and I generally found all of the characters in here quite interesting, although I'm not gonna lie, I got some of them mixed up because some of them have very similar names, so I like got a little bit confused because there are a lot of characters in this book, but that might have just been me. Overall though, this was just really fun and entertaining, and I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. Second to last, I read De Dødes Tjern by André Bjerke. This is a Norwegian mystery/crime classic, and the story is about a group of young people who decide to go up to this cabin in the forest by this lake to investigate the suicide of one of their friends. Now, this title translates to The Lake of the Dead, but I can't actually find an English translation of this. I don't know if it's available in any other languages, but I'm surprised it hasn't been translated into English. Like, someone should get on that. So for me, it was really fun to read a Norwegian mystery classic because I really haven't read a lot of them, and this one really creeped me out. I love the setting of this. It starts off in Oslo, but very quickly they move on to this cabin that's surrounded by dense forest, and nearby is this little creepy lake. And they spend a lot of time in this cabin where it seems they may not be entirely alone. Now, I probably felt an extra sense of connection to the setting in this because I've grown up close to loads of like little lakes surrounded by forest, so I could so vividly picture it, and I just thought the atmosphere was amazing, and I loved reading about the history and the lore of this place, and it really did like creep me out so much so that I had to put it down when it got dark because I got scared. I thought the characters in here were really interesting, and I really liked seeing them interact because they're all very different and they all have very different ideas of what's going on and what could be going on. Now, there are a few things I really don't like about this book, and my biggest problem with it is its outdated view on women. It keeps referring to women as the weaker and the less intelligent sex, and I think that that view shows in the way that the female characters in here are built. And I do realize that this book is quite old, like I think it's over 80 years old, but I just couldn't ignore it because it kept coming up. I also do think that the revelation in this felt like a very dense chunk of information. Like it was very interesting, but it was a little bit heavy to get through. I do think this is a really interesting look into this time though, and the ideas that permeated society. And the story has a little bit of supernatural going on in it and a whole lot of psychoanalysis. And I was never bored when I was reading this, and like I said, it's really, really creepy. So I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars, although it is quite close to 4 stars. Lastly, I read Carol by Patricia Highsmith. This is a modern classic, and in it we meet a 19-year-old woman who is working in a department store in New York, and one day while at work she meets this beautiful and alluring woman, and she feels her very first shock of love, and soon she finds herself entangled in this woman's world. I'm really happy that I finally got around to reading this book because it's one that's been on my radar for years and years, and it's very much worth getting to. I really love the setting of this. The atmosphere is great, and I like the way that it captures the time period, and I really felt like I could picture all of it, and it worked as an amazing backdrop to the story. And I loved getting to know these two women and seeing them fall in love. It was beautiful, but also a little sad sometimes, and it was very interesting to just read about a lesbian relationship in this time period. I think the writing in this is solid. It pays a lot of attention to detail, and sometimes it's quite lyrical, and I really like that. I did notice that sometimes the dialogue felt a little bit off to me, but I think maybe that's just me, I don't really know. I do think there is a lot of sensitivity and emotion to the writing in this though, and I really like that. All that being said though, I was not as invested and as engrossed in this story as I thought I was going to be. And I don't really know why that is, but I'm guessing it has something to do with the fact that I very rarely read romance novels because I generally just don't enjoy them. I don't find them that interesting. And even though this is one of the better love stories that I've read, there is something about those types of stories that they just don't capture me. Overall though, this was well worth the read, and I'm really glad that I finally got around to it, and I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. Okay guys, those were all of the books that I had to talk about today. I'd love to know what you guys have been reading lately, and how is your reading going these days? Because I feel like when this whole thing happened and suddenly I had all of this time to spend at home, my reading went really well for a few weeks. Like, I just loved reading, and now I feel like it's tapering off a little bit, if that makes sense. So let me know how all of that is with you, and I will see you soon. Bye!